I would now like to invite two participants in the March of the Living, Tali Katz, a student from this year's march, and her mother, Eynat Katz, who participated in the very first March of the Living 30 years ago.
A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. My name is Eynat Katz, and I'm a granddaughter of Holocaust survivor. And my first step began in April 1988, exactly 30 years ago. At that time, I was a 17-year-old grade 11 student at a Jewish high school in Toronto when the first heard about the March of the Living. Students and survivors walking hand in hand to retrace the steps of Jewish roots from the Holocaust to the birth of the State of Israel. It was 1988. Israel was going to celebrate its 40th anniversary, and I was going to partake in a trip that would forever change my life. I went home all excited, and I shared my good news with my family. But much to my surprise, my Saba and Savta, my grandparents, who were pivotal forces in my life, said absolutely not. I was not to go back there because there was no reason for me to witness the atrocities that they had survived. To them, I was a grandchild of a Holocaust survivor, and there was nothing more that I needed to know beyond that. But to me, that was the exact reason why I had to go back. I had to see for myself. Even at a young age, I understood that who I was and who I was going to be was tied up in those very tragic experiences. I was haunted by questions which I needed answers. And so when the March of the Living came to my school, I knew I had to go. But what I didn't realize at the time was that the March of the Living was going to open up Pandora's box of emotions and further questions that would take me years to deal with. 30 years ago, I visited some of the very same concentration camps that my Saba survived and from which he was liberated. I also visited Lodz Ghetto, where my Savta hid in an underground bunker, a small underground cold room with 33 people in it. Upon my return, I began my quest to find the answers to all of my questions. I understood how 6 million Jews were murdered, but I could not understand how anyone, let alone my Saba and Savta, could have survived. I finally understood why my Savta never again believed in God. But what I couldn't understand was how my Saba not only continued to believe in God, but continued to go to the synagogue daily. How could he remain such an optimist? How could he, after witnessing and surviving all of this, become the extraordinary man with such exceptionally strong values and morals? He believed that all human beings are created b'tselem Elokim, in the image of God, and therefore discrimination, prejudice, and racism were completely foreign to him. I realized after many years that my Saba, like many other Holocaust survivors, did not allow his experiences in the Holocaust to define him. That was not his legacy. Part of the reason that my Saba survived was because of the type of human being that he was, his tremendous inner strength and wisdom, his eternal optimism, and hope for a better tomorrow. My Saba believed that we are all ones who are responsible for every single one of our actions. He taught me by example the core principles and values that guided all of his actions. Gmilut chasadim, to be charitable. Hachnasat ochim, to be hospitable to strangers. Bikur cholim, to visit the sick. Lenachem avelim, to comfort the mourners. And most of all, to treat others as you would want to be treated. Ahavat shalom ben adam lechavero, and to bring peace to the world. Both my grandparents knew the precious value in the everyday and in the every single experience. And we were grateful, and they were grateful for every little thing around them. They cherished every moment, and they showed love to all those who were around them. Acts of kindness, tikkun olam, was a motto they both lived by. Both believed that each day was another opportunity to go out into the world and to do good deeds, to change the world with one good deed at a time. My Saba taught me never to walk by a homeless person without acknowledging them and looking them straight in the eye and sharing a kind word and some spare change. I remember vividly walking down the streets of Ramat Gan, holding my Saba's hand and watching his quiet and kind demeanor. He always carried loose change in his pocket and always asked me to drop a few coins into each cup or outstretched hand that we passed by. My Saba and Safta also taught me to love and respect the land of Israel, to stand up for Israel, to always take action in order to protect it. It was in that year, in 1988, that I began to understand the lessons of my grandparents and what they tried to impart to me. And today, 2018, 30 years later, I can see how my grandparents and my very first March of the Living experience shaped the person that I have become. It molded my personal outlook on life and my deep commitment to my own Jewish community. In fact, I'm still connected to March of the Living 30 years after my initial experience. Right now, we marched from Auschwitz to Birkenau. I marched with my family, including my 17-year-old daughter, Tali, now in grade 11, attending the very same high school that I did exactly 30 years ago. They say that when you listen to a witness, you become a witness. I heard my grandparents and I shared my understanding of their experiences with my own children. Today, on this 30th anniversary of the March of the Living, Tali experienced part of my Saba's and Safta's story, and she also heard so many other stories directly from Holocaust survivors all around the world. Today, I will pass the torch to my own daughter to be the next witness, a fourth-generation great-granddaughter of Holocaust survivors.
My participation in the March of the Living is in many ways an example of the strength of the Jewish people. Just a few minutes ago, I marched from Auschwitz to Birkenau with my classmates, with other Jewish teenagers from around the world, with my family, and with Holocaust survivors. If I could go back in time to ask my grandfather and my great-grandfather if they could have ever imagined such a thing, I think I know what their answer would be. Impossible. As I look out onto this massive crowd and look into the eyes of the Holocaust survivors sitting in front of me now, the same Holocaust survivors that stood where I am standing right now all those years ago, looking at the barracks, looking at the smoke coming from the stacks of the crematorium, and standing in the same space that we are all in now. In your wildest dreams, could you have believed back in 1944, some 74 years ago, that today we would stand here together in solidarity and sing Israeli songs? Could you have ever imagined thousands of young Jewish people from around the world with the President of Israel, the Prime Minister of Israel, the Chief Rabbi of Israel, and the Chief of Staff all standing together with the Polish President here in Birkenau? Could you have ever imagined that we would all be standing here carrying the flag of Israel, a country that did not exist some 7 decades ago? I know that my grandfather and my great-grandfather would never have believed it. Not even in their wildest dreams would they have thought this to be even a remote possibility. After all, how could the Jewish people from almost total destruction and annihilation rise from the ashes? I strongly believe that this shows us that no matter how dark life can get, there is always a reason to hope. For Jews and non-Jews from around the world to come together, to pledge peace, to come together from a place of love and not hate, I believe that we, all of us here together, represent the ultimate victory against Nazism.